day, everybody. Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast. I'm Bryan Hornung, one of your co-hosts, here with Reginald Andre, Bryan and Ryan O'Hara. The crew is here to upset you more about what's going on in the world of cybersecurity. And I'm still a bit under the weather, but not too bad. So how you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great.
Doing well. Had a great 4th of July weekend. Spent it at the beach.
Nice.
Which beach did you spend it at?
In Hollywood,
nice.
Florida.
Nice.
Yes.
Cool. I've been seeing a ton of posts, and I don't know why, but this place in Florida called Peanut Island. You know about this place?
No.
Look it up because it's been like all over my like social media feed. Like all my friends are like visiting this place for some reason. But it's
Peanut or Peanut?
Peanut Island. I think it's a sandbar or something out towards Fort Lauderdale. Seems to be the happening place. But I digress. I want to welcome everyone to the show, Security Squawk podcast. This is the podcast where we really try to bring light to what the heck is going on out there in the world. And I honestly, when we started the podcast, and I actually think this is episode number like 82 at this point. So we're well into about a year and a half of it. And it's amazing to me how much things have changed with kind of how we collect and get information to talk about on the show. I've alluded recently to the fact that, it's harder and harder to get this information. But as we're going to show you today is with some of the things, like we're really missing the mark in a lot of different places. And it seems to me that the strategy for, the government and the media is to kind of bury this stuff and then kind of make it not a thing. Because it's really hard to find information about cyber attacks these days. And even when you do, the information is not that great. And I think I mentioned it a couple of times last week that I don't want people to think that this is getting better because it's not in the news, because it's clearly it's getting worse as the days move on here, and cyber criminals are, not only getting better, but some of them, we're going to talk about are evil in a little bit, who could potentially be making a comeback. But at the end of the day, guys, this show is created to get you this information so you can see it's a serious problem. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these events to help you better prepare for what could come to your front door very, very easily down the road, to your business, to your personal life. And that's the point of the show. So now we're going to talk about the fee for the show. And Randy, you're going to teach everybody what the fee for the show is.
So our fee is fee $99, which is free actually, but our fees, we just ask that you like, share, subscribe, comment wherever you see this posted, share it with your friends. We don't charge for this. We don't have ads at this point, but we just ask it to share it and get the word out about it.
That's pretty much it. So we put together our time and effort. We do spend a lot of time prepping for the show. We were kind of laughing. It takes us longer to prep for the show than it does to actually do the show. But we do prep for the show, and we don't charge for it. We do shoot a little bit off the cuff once we get wrapping, but there is a very structured outline to what we put together to bring you the most valuable and relevant information around, cybersecurity and how to start protecting yourself. So with that being said, let's just wrap about this. I want to go drive to this, an article from Sam Sabin over at Politico that drew my attention. And he brought up some interesting points. And the number one thing is that, we're officially at the halfway mark for 2022. June is 6 months, and now we're into the 7th month. So we're starting, to head into the second half of 2022. And man, the first 6 months just absolutely flew by. I mean, for me. And I don't know if it's been the same for you guys, but, as Sam Sabin over at Politico has pointed out, it seems like it's flown by for the U.S. government too, because we're not making a lot of progress with a lot of the things that the Biden administration and the federal government has kind of laid out as cybersecurity plans. We've kind of thrown the flag in the ground, so to speak, in terms of high-fiving each other and doing our obligatory photo ops once we sign these bills and we do these things. But there really hasn't been a lot of action taken. And I wanted to kind of jump into that a little bit before we talk about some of these cyber attacks that are going on right now. So one of the things that this article brings up is that we're officially kind of halfway over 2022, and they have a long ass cyber to-do list staring them down before the year is up. And one of the big goals that they have set, at least at the Department of Justice, is by September of next year, they want to have the goal of having 2/3 of all ransomware case reported to the feds. But we don't even know how to tell you what 2/3 is at this point, right? And I think that's what this article points out. And let's rap about that a little bit, because it's kind of what I alluded to last week on the show last week and at the beginning of the show this week. It's like, how do we know, right? Because we're going to show you some ransomware attacks here in a few minutes that are happening to what I would consider some pretty relevant and important entities, and there's not a whole lot out there in the news about what's going on around this stuff. What are you guys pulling out of this article from Politico that I don't know if you want to talk about how do we, that's a good question. Like, how do we figure out how many total ransomware attacks there are? How do we figure this out?
I mean, my first thought is maybe they set themselves up to shoot themselves in the foot. Like let's start with just getting people to report them, and maybe figure out how many along the way, rather than trying to figure out how many first and then say, okay, we know there's 1 million a day, so we want 750,000 to be reported. Seems like they need to start with what we can do, which is ask people to report them, and then figure out the other thing later. Maybe figure out a way to do that. I don't know. Those are my thoughts right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I got you. I think I'm with you on that, because it's like you stated a goal of having 2/3 of all ransomware cases, right? But like you said, you have no idea what that number is. So if it's 10, and you get 6 reports, I guess you've met your goal, right?
Well, I think part of the problem too is a lot of people don't realize that they should or need to report, and a lot of people don't even want to, because they don't know what the process is or what the fallout of something like that would be. There's just this unknown fear of not being educated to how the whole process works. So, particularly with smaller businesses, they don't even, it doesn't even occur to them to report. A lot of them will just, reload their computers or change their passwords and move on like nothing happened, and potentially move on while the attacker is still in their systems, and it happens all over again. So I don't think a lot of the smaller businesses even know what disclosing means or would entail to be able to even start tackling that.
Or that they would even have to.
Right.
People are not as in tune to this stuff as we are. So it's not, it wouldn't be beyond question if somebody was like, hey, I had no idea that I had to do that. But at the same time, you not knowing is not a defense, right? You can't say like, I didn't know I was supposed to collect a certain tax and not remit it. Once you're in business, that's the responsibility that people have when they start businesses. They have to go out and they have to do this due diligence and understand what laws and what things their business has to follow. And there's laws around taxes. There's laws around cybersecurity, that you have to do certain things. And every single state in the United States has a data breach reporting law on the books, whether they enforce it, whether companies realize that they need to do it. But there is not a state in the union today that does not have a law on the books about data breach reporting, and that includes a ransomware attack. So part of this is, in my mind, it's lawmakers and elected officials thinking that the business community or the business world has this information, has this awareness that these laws are on the books and that they need to adhere to them. In a similar sense that, I've seen in the past other states and other local governments put out ads and do advertising around a certain, law or something new that might have changed in the state. I wouldn't be surprised, in a similar way that you have to have those employment posters posted somewhere in public, right? A lot of businesses know that they need to do that. Well, how did they know that, right? These similar has to happen with cybersecurity, right? Because people have to know what they need to report on and what they need to do. Because I know, we talked about it with the one example I gave last week with the CPA firm. They obviously were under the state of New Jersey's laws to report that data breach, and they didn't do it. And that's just the interesting thing. And I don't, this business by no means would I ever think that they did it maliciously or intently. We're going to hide this from people. They just didn't realize that they had to do it. Their main concern was getting their business back up and running. And then, then they moved on. And I think that that's where a lot of companies are. They get hit. But I guess I'll throw it out to you guys to answer this question. Put it out there real quick. Even if we did have awareness around these laws and people understood it, is this the type of thing where you as a victim are going to come out and admit that it happened to you?
Well, I think that's part of the problem is the fear. Like, just the idea of calling up the FBI and saying, hey, we had this ransomware attack, without knowing what's going to happen, people don't really want to call the FBI unless they need to, right? So that's the hard part.
Yeah, I think there's either got to be an incentive or a punishment. Because let's just say, for example, your car gets, someone opens up your door in your car, you left it unlocked, and someone steals your AirPods. You're not going to call the cops. But if someone comes into your home and breaks in and steal things, you're going to want the cops to come in, take fingerprints, and help you. So if you call the government and all they're going to do is take some information and that's it, then why even bother? What's the next step? And unless there is some type of incentive where they're going to say, we're going to help you through this process, or we'll help you with a tax break on your ransomware loss, or if you don't do it, there's a fine if you don't report ransomware, then no one's going to do it.
Yeah, unless you're a huge critical infrastructure company at this point, the FBI is not helping. They're just adding you to a database of research that they're doing. Correct,
100%. And so one of the things that also came out of the article is the fact that House lawmakers have increased CISA's. CISA, if you don't know who that is basically the U.S. government's cybersecurity agency or wing. Their whole purpose in life is to help protect our federal government from cyber attacks, as well as provide resources to private industry to help them prevent cyber attacks. The interesting thing here is that CISA is getting a $3 billion budget this year, which is a 13% increase from last year's levels, right? So the federal government's fiscal year starts in September, and that's when this money is going to go into effect. The reason I bring this up is has your business increased its cybersecurity spend 13%? And again, this is another increase, and I think they've increased almost every year for the last 5 or 6 years over at CISA. Their budget has been increasing. So if you see the federal government increasing their budget, it makes a lot of sense for your business to start looking at and doing the same thing. Because
or establishing a budget in the first place.
Well, yeah, let's start there. I mean, that's where it's got to start. But if you just look at what your federal government is doing, you got to look at that and go, well, why are they increasing their budget that much? I mean, that's a pretty big increase. 13% to increase something 13% on any line item in a business or in a government. It's a pretty significant increase. You don't see 13% increases in a government budget very often. Maybe you'll see an average of 2-3%, sometimes, inflation type adjustments. And when they really increase it more than that, it means that they really have a focus on dealing with it. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up. Now, I'm going to kind of throw the question out there to you guys and see, and I'll ask each one of you to kind of chime in here. What do you think is going to happen the second half of this year for businesses and going into 2023? Do you think we're going to see similar increases with the private industry, or do you think that we're still going to be kind of pushing that rock uphill a little bit, convincing these business leaders to spend the appropriate amount of funds on cybersecurity?
I mean, at this point, this sounds probably a little cliche to us, but at this point, the IT people, whether that's in-house or companies like ours, are going to have to do a better job of communicating how the risk has grown, how we're in a more tough situation than we were. We're going to have to change our spend. We're going to have to change our focus. We're going to have to change what we do. We're going to have to change our stack. Like, all these companies are going to have to do that. And us as leaders are going to have to do a better job of communicating that to people so they know the risk. Like I said, it sounds kind of cliche. They need that risk light bulb, if you will, to go off in their head to go, oh, wow, my whole business is at risk. I need to do something about it. Not just throw money at it, but actually do some things to actually make my business less of a target than most of the businesses out there that aren't doing anything.
Yeah, I still feel like it's going to be a pushing the rock uphill kind of scenario. What we're seeing a lot of is people only starting to tune into cybersecurity protections because their insurance company is telling them they need to in order to keep their policies. And even then, I only want what they're telling me I need to have. And most of the insurance companies don't really know what they're telling people they need to have in the first place, because they're giving them bits and pieces of cybersecurity, not a full cybersecurity package as a requirement. And some people, are still fine just rolling without cybersecurity insurance and are literally rolling the dice every day that they do business. And they're fine with that until they get hit.
Yeah, same uphill battle, and especially as we now have to wait takes us a long time to find these news articles as far as hacks and things like that. It's going to be out of sight, out of mind, and people are not seeing it in the news every day that their local companies or neighbors are getting hacked, and now our customers are going to think that the problem went away, problem solved.
I think one thing, if there was a way to remove the stigma of something like this, I think that could help people, because when we see somebody who was not, they didn't want security, they didn't think that they needed security, then they get hit, and all of a sudden that huge price increase that was a big deal for them, when you were talking about it beforehand, is all of a sudden no big deal. Like, if people felt comfortable sharing, hey, we didn't think we were a target, we got hacked, and now we're doing this stuff, and we think you should be too. Don't go through what we went through. But there's just such a stigma to getting hacked that nobody wants to talk about it. We talk to small business owners all the time, and they say, "Oh, I don't know anybody who's gotten hacked." I guarantee you, they know at least a couple people who have gotten hacked, but nobody wants to talk about it because it's embarrassing. They don't want to admit that it happened to them. But if we were, as business leaders, to share that information with people and share that experience, I think we'd get more people to kind of turn around and go, you're right. I'm going to invest in it one way or another. I might as well invest in protecting myself so I don't have to go through all that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
I was going to say that's a great point, because we as leaders could help normalize this, if you will, maybe by having people on occasion on our podcast or on our individual podcasts, having people on there that have been through this and interviewing them to reduce the stigma. I mean, we don't stigmatize people who get their car stolen, or their laptop stolen. unless they did something dumb, which I guess, okay, we got to probably work on that then, I guess, because if we're not careful, we're going to go, well, duh,
Well,
all
that's
you
the
had was
problem.
backups,
Is in hindsight, some of this stuff does seem that way, but
Right.
in most cases, it's a case of you don't know what you don't know. I mean,
Yep.
these people didn't realize that having an open RDP port was leaving the front door open for attackers to come in. So in hindsight, yeah, hey, that wasn't a smart thing to do, but they didn't know going into it. So on one hand, we need to do a better job of educating people, but they have to listen too. So there's a two-way street. But helping people understand that you don't know what you don't know, and that doesn't make it your fault. Share that knowledge and help other business owners.
Yeah, that's a good point. That would be how we normalize it.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of a friend of ours whose laptop was stolen when they visited San Antonio, and like they called me and, is there anything we can do? And I was like, yeah, we can log into your iCloud account and click on Find That Mac. And she's like, well, I didn't have that set up. I didn't know. I didn't know I could do that.
Right.
So, I mean, bottom line is, you're right. It seems obvious after the fact, but before, you may not know that you could do that. You may not even know that's a thing.
And I mean, that's part of the reason for the fee for this show, right? It's not so much, I don't look at it so much as, being an issue of our time and sharing it because of that. It's an issue of, letting people know so that they can learn these things, help people learn the things that they don't know so that they can take those steps to protect themselves.
Because they're not going to get this stuff anywhere else. That's the bigger.
Well, that's the problem. We're talking about the government needing to spread awareness so people know that they need to report in the first place. But it's people like us who are going out and sharing this information. We're not hearing it from the people who are supposedly requiring or trying to require this notification.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andre.
I'll be interested to know, with that 13% increase, is that going to programs to educate, or is that going to just be salaries?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I mean, CISA, unfortunately, especially with the CMMC side of things, they've, there's been corruption. There's been a lot of things going on there, which you hate to see, but it's kind of par for the course for federal government. And then, I have my own opinions that I'll kind of keep to myself with what happened over at CISA, and, they are working on cleaning that up. But at the end of the day, we still see, the government taking this more seriously, right? Senate, and this is kind of where businesses are going to find themselves as well, right? Businesses are going to think that they can do it a certain way, and they're going to realize that they can't do it a certain way. And I think at one point the government thought that CISA could handle the cybersecurity for the entire federal government. And I think the federal government is learning very slowly that that's not going to be the case. And I think businesses should also learn from that, because trying to kind of do this on your own, take your network administrator or take your CIO and slap a security tag on them and say that they're your security person, it's turning out to be a really bad idea, right? Because they might be great from a technical standpoint. They might be your superstar IT person that whatever you throw at them, they can, get the system working and running, and, whatever ideas you have, they can make them come to fruition. But those are different skill sets and different people than what you need in cybersecurity. And I know I said that before on the show, but the Senate is even learning this, because they're looking at creating a new assistant secretary role at the Pentagon focused on cyber policy, which CISA is supposed to be focused on cyber policy for the entire government, including the DoD. But, instead, Congress realizes that things just aren't moving fast enough over at CISA because they don't have enough people. That's really what it boils down to. There's not enough cybersecurity talent out there to deal with this problem, guys. And the government is feeling it, and so are businesses. Now, yes, every 6 months, 9 months, we get a new crop of cybersecurity people coming into the workforce, but they have very limited experience and very limited knowledge. The people that know how to do this stuff, the people that are educated, have the experience, and have been fighting this battle for the better part of a decade, there's not a heck of a lot of us, and there's a lot of groundwork to be made up before that skills gap gets filled. And we're going to see a lot of these things. We're going to see a lot of companies that hire an IT person that they think can do security, or they promote from within a IT person to run their security, and then they're going to have a problem, and then they're going to realize that was a bad move, and then they're going to end up calling a company, an outsourced company that can help them deal with either the cyber incident, which after the cyber incident they're probably going to retain that company for ongoing consulting, or they're going to get close enough to an attack, or they're going to have a near miss that's going to scare the crap out of them enough where they're going to reach out to a third party company and say, hey, we can do this on our own. And that's kind of the moral of the story here for me, is like, you really need to learn that you can't do this on your own, and you need to enlist the right people for this kind of stuff.
I do really like the idea of incentivizing it in some way. And so you think of tax incentives right off the bat, which then gives you a channel of reporting. So it's something that every business needs to do. They need to file their taxes. They need to keep up with that stuff. If there was some sort of tax break for in implementing cybersecurity protections, that also then you have a question on your taxes every year. Over the course of this tax year, did you have any type of cyber attack or compromise? And then that way you're kind of you're giving them the means to report, as well as an incentive to protect. And so maybe to offset that tax break that they're getting, with less cyber attacks, hopefully there's less money being spent all across the board to compensate for that. So.
And just digging into kind of a little bit more of the numbers for there's a lot on the plate for these lawmakers this year. Touching on the critical infrastructure sectors, we have two legislators out of the Northeast, Rhode Island and New York, a Democrat and Republican, who are looking at a proposal or trying to get something on the floor that better defines the critical infrastructure sectors that were identified to 16, because they obviously realized that was a complete debacle in basically going out and saying that, and then month after month something that either touches or is you would consider within those 16 critical infrastructure sectors got hit with ransomware, and nothing was really ever done. So it's like, well, they're in healthcare, but they're not like super important to healthcare to where we would consider it critical infrastructure. Right? When hospitals were getting hit, hospitals are one of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, but they get hit all the time. And we're not seeing like major responses from our government like we heard would happen if they were attacked. The other interesting thing is we already kind of talked about the ransomware push, and to make sure that companies are reporting on time and reporting significantly, or reporting on significant attacks. But the rules that they want to push out are 72 hours with any attack, and then if you've made a ransomware payment, you have to report it within 24 hours. Now, I think that's the piece right there that's going to make the difference, because you can track where I think there's a company out there, and we talked about them last week, that tracks internet traffic and Bitcoin wallets and ransomware payments. And I think that's going to be the way that you're going to be able to catch a lot of these businesses that don't report, is you're going to be able to identify wallet addresses. And when you see money going to certain wallet addresses, that somebody's paying somebody for ransomware. But obviously you're going to have a really hard time figuring out who's behind the wallet address that's sending money. But it is at least an indicator that you could say, hey, it looks like we have an uptick in payments to this particular ransomware wallet, and who's doing it, and start to try to figure it out. Anything else from this Politico article that you guys wanted to kind of highlight? I mean, there's a lot here. I actually didn't even scroll down when we were in the green room all the way to kind of see. My biggest thing is that there's a lot here, and we're falling behind pretty quick as the months and months go on, and not much is done.
Yeah, I remember we did a whole segment on this website, the Stop Ransomware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it looks the same, you know?
Yep.
No promotions.
Well, I personally remember trashing the shit out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and because I just thought it was a big diarrhea dump of information that nobody was going to go through. There was no intuitive way to lay it out to where you would, you know, actually engage somebody to actually go through the material.
Yeah, and we all go to different trade shows with, you know, different companies, different partners, and we never see them out there. You know, they don't have a booth letting us know, hey, this is us. Here's how we can help you and things like that.
No,
well, that's the hard part. So, like all the stuff that's listed in this article, I mean, how much time and money was spent putting all of this stuff together, and nobody knows about any of this stuff. So, what good is it even doing at this point?
It's a good question. So
it either has no teeth, no definition, nobody knows about it. I mean, none of this stuff is really solving anything right now.
It's funny. So I don't see anything else that we're worth like pulling out in this article. We could talk about some other things later on as they pan out. But, you know, people just need to start doing something. That's kind of the moral of the story. Don't wait for the government. Don't wait for, you know, something bad to happen in your business. Start doing something today about cyber attacks, and you're going to be much better off. So part of what we want to talk about and why we wanted to bring up kind of the Politico article first is because it highlights a lot of the things that we're going to jump into today. Number one is this, you know, Baton Rouge general cyber attack, hospitals officials say. So we have hospital officials coming out admitting that, hey, we've been attacked. And I've only been able to find one article on this from a obscure website called brproud.com. And this actually happened last week before the holiday. It didn't happen over the holiday weekend. It happened like Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday of last week. And yep, Baton Rouge General is definitely under a ransomware attack. But, you know, we can talk about what's going on there, but we don't have a lot of information. And talk a little bit about, like, why do we think this is happening? Like, are we seeing more and more critical infrastructure type companies, agencies being dumped into these little no-name, you know, news outlets to report these attacks?
I think it's a couple things. I think that these companies, these entities are learning that they have to go through their attorneys and their insurance providers. So they're realizing that they need to limit the flow of information and not just, you know, run around like their hair's on fire in a panic, letting everybody know who will listen. And two, I just, as a news, you know, for news articles, it doesn't move the needle for people anymore. So it's not something that they're seeing a lot of traffic on. So it's not as important for them to report on.
So is that, I mean, if I'm a business owner and I hear what you just said, why do I need to spend all this money on cyber stuff if nobody cares about it?
Well, because the business that is going through it definitely cares about it because they're feeling the pain and it's going to cost them to get out of it. But that's the problem. If other businesses don't know that, then they think along those lines. You know, no big deal.
So and I'm going to kind of, and I'm going to pick apart these articles a little bit because it just seems to me like there's a massive amount of information control going on around this stuff. I don't think it's about moving the needle at all. I personally think that there's a more concerted effort here to make sure that this stuff doesn't hit the news. And I don't want to sound too tinfoil hat here, but it's just really odd to me that this stuff doesn't add up and it's bullshit. And I'd love for, you know, people in our audience to like comment and share with us what they think is going on. But you can't say in one sentence, right, something along the lines of that the attack has not affected their ability to care for patients at all locations, and then in the very next sentence say, with the systems down, BRG personnel is temporarily charting on paper. You're not going to sit here and tell me with a straight face that a hospital is operating and not losing their ability to care for patients when they're doing everything on paper, when everybody at that hospital has been trained to use the computer.
Right.
Yeah, and do they keep all those paper records going back how far, on site? Like, what if they need to look at a patient history?
Well, my thing is you're a nurse, and since day one, you've been trained like a monkey to do something on a computer, and somebody puts a piece of paper in front of you, you're going to need to be retrained. You're not going to know how to do that, and that's going to slow down care. I don't care what world you live in, and that's kind of just how I feel about it. It's just like I've talked to enough people in hospitals who have gone through cyber attacks, and when you put this paperwork in front of them, it's almost like a deer in headlights. Many of these people, I mean, think about people who haven't even been working there 2 months, right? Who just started, right? And they're being kind of given the fire hose of here's how we do things here, and here's the computer system, and here's how you log in, and here's how you enter this, and here's how you enter that, and boom. Now you're no longer entering things on a computer. You're now putting it on paper, and this person has no idea how to do anything, let alone put it on paper. They don't even know how to use the computer. You're not going to move easily to paper, and then the people who are training them don't know how to use the paper either. They have to be retrained.
Yep.
So I that's where I have an issue with a lot of this stuff. It's just like I've been involved with these things. A hell of a lot goes on in terms of their ability to care for patients. Anybody's ability to care for, or anybody's ability to do anything in their business, when they're used to doing a system and running things a certain way and they have to go to a different way of doing it, that's going to impact how efficiently you can deliver your services. I don't care what business you're in. So I have a really hard time when I read this stuff. So you combine, tiny little news outlet in Louisiana, coupled with the fact that you're reading articles like with this kind of stuff in it. And I'm just sitting here going, this is happening way too much, where these big events are being dumped into these little news outlets, and they're saying things that just to us like don't add up, in a similar sense to when we also see like no information has been compromised, or nobody's personal information has been accessed, and then we find out it was. Like, we're going to find out that the days and weeks that the hospital was dealing with this problem is going to be the complete opposite of what we're reading in the second paragraph in this article.
What's the other side of it being a small news outlet is the people who work at these small newsletters probably don't know what questions to ask. They don't know what doesn't add up because this isn't their wheelhouse.
Yeah, I'm almost a little bit more cynical than that, Rye. I'm almost thinking that these lawyers are really good at identifying these little outlets and basically saying, here, this is what we want you to put out because this is our public disclosure, our official public disclosure, and this is how we want it worded. And they're really just not interested in being that like investigative reporter. They're just like, okay, yeah, well, we'll put this out. Thanks for the story.
Here's 5 lines on our website. Boom, done.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this more in the last 6 months. Similar, like I talked to you guys about in the green room. I've seen this more in the last 6 months than I've seen since I've been dealing with ransomware, and I think this is kind of like the way forward. And to me, it reeks of information control. Right or wrong, I don't know. I'm not like somebody who's dealing with incident response on a daily basis. If I'm in an incident responder's shoes, this is like the perfect playbook. But I just fear that, when we're not letting people know the full damage of the situations and we're brushing them under the rug like this, the collateral damage of doing something like that seems to be something that we need to or just the unintended consequences, I guess, by doing this is more what I want to say. Like, I get why we're doing this, but it begins to minimize the problem, and it begins to give other people who aren't affected by this a false sense of security that this isn't that big of a deal.
Right. No, it shouldn't be that hard for us to talk to a business owner and have to convince them that this stuff is going on. It should be common knowledge.
Yeah, I just feel like it just too many times it's getting chalked up to like this is a big deal. So this isn't a big deal. So so let's just jump into this last one. I know Randy's got to go. Are Evil, are they back or are they not back? Who knows what? So Are Evil, if everybody remembers, it was the reason that ransomware was in the news last year, right? They were the ones behind the CISA attack and quite a number of attacks prior to CISA that were very large in the news. And our kind of analysis was, and we've talked about this on the show, and I've done on my own YouTube channel, I've done a kind of an analysis on this group, and it was before the CISA attack that I did my video. But over time, we've kind of figured that they splintered and kind of started different groups and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's reports that they could be back. So what's going on?
Well, they definitely could be back. I think there's also the possibility that the pieces of the original group are still utilizing infrastructure that they had created. It's hard to say. I mean, I don't know that it really matters either. I mean, we know that these groups are spreading, and it doesn't matter who it is. They're out there and they're fracturing and splintering, and there's just as many, if not more, out there.
Right.
I've got a prediction about it. So 10 or 15 of them were actually arrested by Russia back before all the crap in Ukraine.
That's a good point.
Most likely they've been talked to, hey, we need you guys to work for the motherland. Come on, and we'll forgive your crimes. Mm-hmm. So if they come back, it's probably with a little bit of Russian, tip of the hat to them at the minimum.
They're now back channel state sponsored.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right, because they kind of went away. There was a lot of heat put on them after the CISA attack, and things were not where they were today geopolitically. And I think any kind of summit between Biden and Putin would never happen today. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of on the heels of that summit. And I think you guys are right. I think the Russian authorities have said, like, hey, we're not working with the people on the Western side of things anymore that we were when we initially told you to chill out. And over time, these guys have probably looked at each other and said, hey, we could probably get the band back together without much negative fanfare. So interesting. We'll see what happens here. And again, guys, we are July 5th, 2022. We're probably about 10 days to 2 weeks to hearing about all the attacks that happened over the weekend this weekend, because they did happen. Just because they're not front and center on the news doesn't mean that we're not going to have some issues here. There are some companies, real quick, that are under a cyber attack. What is that one company called? You guys want to throw it out there? Knuff Insulation. Mm-hmm. They have a message up on their website that they've been dealing with a cyber incident, but again, that seemed to be before the holidays as well.
There's a hospital group in Missouri that's under attack right now.
That's right. And I think the other thing too is that Louisiana, their benefits, they were under a cyber attack last week, right? And people are having trouble with that. Another Louisiana issue that is, this stuff's barely in the news. It's blowing my mind. So, I guess it needs to be a big piece of software like CISA in order to make the news anymore. I don't know, but that's it. Thanks for your time, guys. Guys, got anything else you want to talk about before we split?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thanks for another good episode. We'll get this one up. Remember, share our show, and we'll see you